We will take the same format. I will say, and I realize I'm probably not surprising anyone, that attorneys don't necessarily do this, but you don't have to use every second that you have for your answers. But we will continue to use the same format. And we will begin at the far side with 2-minute opening statements. Mr. Pappas.
Okay. My name is Matt Pappas, and I'm a civil rights lawyer representing people who have been abused by government. And I've done that for a number of years, mainly as a result of an injury suffered by my daughter several years ago when she was attacked. And for her, the most effective medication after she was in coma for a number of weeks was medical cannabis. I'm the attorney that brought the case that struck down the city's medical marijuana ordinance several years ago. And I have continued to fight for medical marijuana patients, as well as for people who are have been affected because of actions by the police and others. I want to talk about the decision-making of the current city attorney and his predecessor. Before I brought the case, I offered to settle it multiple times, and the city attorney at that time, Bob Shen, refused discussion with me in that regard. And we went forward, we struck down the ordinance. The city spent millions of dollars when it could have resolved the case long before the issue went as far as it did. Numbers of people went to jail that shouldn't have. A lot of things happened that shouldn't have happened because of bad decision making. Today, I got an email from Mr. Parkin because at the forum on Thursday, he said that we had 13 pending cases against the city that we hadn't won. That's why they're pending. They haven't been won yet. He didn't use the word yet. And today, in that email, he told me that, again, the city attorney's office does not want to sit down and discuss things. I think we need to change how we're doing things here to save the city money, to do the right thing in cases and the right thing by our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Well, thank you. It's going to be hard to win this debate by the same margin that Laura Dow did, but I'll do my best. You know, Long Beach, it's time for you to choose your next city attorney. The city charter makes this an elected position for one simple reason. This is a vitally important leadership position that's going to affect your quality of life, your public safety, how the city you live in lives. I'm running for Long Beach as city attorney because I think I have the leadership for this position, proven leadership and the proven judgment that any leadership position deserves. In a democracy, it's totally appropriate for the people to choose their leader. That's why this position is elected. I've already shown that leadership. Let me tell you real quick about my background. I was born here, went to Harvard and Berkeley, worked at the largest law firm in California, helped rewrite the city charter, our highest law in the city of Long Beach. Became one of the youngest executives in the city, working for Laura Dow as assistant city auditor. Oversaw a lot of the contracts, reviewed those contracts, the revenues. Then became the only person in this race to have elected experience. I'm a city council member. I also teach law at Cal State Long Beach. But my most important qualification is proven leadership and judgment. I came to a city that had rampant pension abuses. We instituted pension reform. I came to a city with over a decade of budget deficits. We instituted a budget surplus. I came to a city deferring maintenance. Now we're rebuilding our streets and sidewalks. As the next city attorney, I'm going to make this the safest possible city. I'm going to protect our environment, and I give the highest quality legal advice. So I respectfully ask for your vote today for James Johnson City. Thank you.
Mr. Parkin.
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight. I was born and raised here in Long Beach. I went to high school here in Long Beach at St. Anthony's, where I met my wife for 37 years here in April, and went to work my way through college, and went to work for the city in 1984 in the Department of Oil Properties. I was a petroleum engineering associate there, and while I was working for the city, I went to law school at night. After 4 years, I Graduated from law school, passed the bar, and was fortunate to go to work in this Long Beach City Attorney's Office in 1995. There I started working in their litigation section, where I worked for 4 years in litigation, trying cases on behalf of the City of Long Beach, learning about the city, learning about their cases. I then transferred over into what we call our departmental counsel section, where I worked with various departments, the oil department, the Tidelands, water department, police department, fire department, and all of the departments in the city, working with them on their issues, on their legal issues, on their contracts, on their agreements, working and learning the city attorney's office. While there, I handled the Queen Mary bankruptcy litigation, where we recovered $8.6 million. I also sued the state of California to set aside abandonment money. We received a judgment in the Court of Appeal of $200 million to set that aside. And I also worked on a land swap here down in the downtown Long Beach, a $49 million transaction, where we set aside Tidelands property down in the Colorado Lagoon for preservation and economical benefits to the Pike area. As worked up, I was promoted to a supervisor, and then to the assistant, and then in July, the city council appointed me as the acting city attorney, and I've been the city attorney now for 8 months. I'm also president of Long Beach City Employees Federal Credit Union, a $300 million financial institution. I've been with that organization since 1998.
Thank you. I'd like to start with you, Charles, on this question, and that is, in your time in the city attorney's office, what are the 2 or 3 things you're proudest of, and what do you think the biggest challenges are facing the city attorney?
Okay, I think I'm proudest of the people I work with. The office is 67 employees. We have 20 attorneys. We have tremendous staff, dedicated staff. We've gone through budget cuts. I've had to lay people off. That's probably one of the most difficult things you have to do. And we did that. We've taken our cuts, as every department pretty much has over these tough times. And we've helped make that surplus. It's not just the city council, it's the departments working to make that surplus. And so those people are the people that develop and deliver the services to the departments, to the city manager, to the council, and they're unsung heroes here in the city.
James, you're not in the office, but if you were elected to it, what changes would you make to it?
Well, a couple of changes. I do think we have a strong team, a lot of great deputy city attorneys, but I think the question is who's going to be the strongest leader. I think one thing I like to do is provide more proactive advice to the city council. Over a decade ago, in 2002, the city council was told by the city manager, you can spike pensions, it won't cost the city anything. Pensions are fundamentally a legal contract, an employment contract. I don't think the city got the right advice. The city was given documents by CalPERS. That wasn't given to the council, at least in open session. The public didn't see those documents. Nobody explained to the council this is a retroactive contract that was going to cost the city $202 million and slash police and fire for decades to come. Nobody explained to the council that the very person proposing this would go home with hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million in his pocket himself. I believe that ethics means not doing what the law requires, doing more than the law requires. So I would go beyond that and advise the council, particularly for financial decisions. That would be one of the main things I would work on. Employment contracts are 90% of the city's costs. I think it's very important. I'd also look at taking our outside counsel and saying, is it time to competitively bid these contracts? For a long time, these folks aren't feeling the pressure. They basically have the contract go on and on. I think we should ask the question, can we do more with less? Can other folks do this work? And I think finally, and thanks Harry for reminding me, it will be finally. Like I said, I think I want to go out and be a more proactive city attorney. When I'm knocking on doors, people don't even know we have a city attorney. I ask them, have you seen the city attorney at your neighborhood events? Have you seen the city attorney ask you what you need? They say no. I think this is an elected official position. I think part of it is going to the community, learning about their needs, so that when I'm looking at a slip and fall lawsuit on some sidewalk, I remember why that's what it's all about someone getting injured, that family. So, thank you.
Well, the city attorney's office handles numbers of cases every year, hundreds of cases. And the office needs to change so that when we're looking at whether a case should be settled or taken to trial, we make the right decision so the taxpayers aren't paying a huge amount of money out because we made the wrong decision. And that's happened numbers of times. We had a case in 2004, the McClure case, that was settled prior to trial, and it resulted in a $21 million verdict against the city. We had Lobster Gate. It resulted in $4.5 million. That could have been settled prior to it going to trial. And we, of course, have the PAC case, the case involving medical marijuana, and numbers of other things that could be done by the city attorney's office in a way that saves the city money. As James said, we also need to be more proactive as a city attorney. I don't think we just go down and tell the city council whether something is legal under the law without investigating issues that may be surrounding that may impact whether or not the city has additional liability in particular circumstances. Those are things that need to change in the city attorney's office. This office has been held by the same group of people for a long period of time. Bob Shannon said that in the July memorandum to the city council. And he has put Mr. Parkin in office ahead of his retirement by his admission to ensure that he's elected city attorney. I don't think that's the way things should be. I think we need to have the city attorney elected by the people that represents all the people, not just particular selected individuals.
Charles, you have 1 minute proposal.
Well, that's why we're having an election here today. I'm not sure that Mr. Pappas understands the charter, and we have elections every 4 years. And something that Mr. Johnson brought up, the pension spikes occurred in 2002. That was voted on by the Long Beach City Council after receiving financial advice from their elected city auditor, their city manager, and their director of finance. I think James has a fundamental misunderstanding of our office if he believes that the attorneys are going to give you the financial advice on whether it's financially a good decision. The memos that he claims were or were not delivered, we're now 12 years later, it's great hindsight.
Charlie's right. We do have a difference of opinion. His opinion is that when the city's about to give away hundreds of millions of dollars, city attorneys just stand by and let nothing happen. And just say, well, it's a policy call. Well, you know what? Pensions are an employment contract. I believe as an attorney that my duty is to advise my client on contracts. That if the person proposing a contract is going to walk away with $1 million, by the way, the last city attorney walked away with about $1 million as well, maybe that explains part of the reason. I believe my role is to advise the client of that conflict. I believe my role, when I know that there are financial documents describing the cost, is to make sure the council gets those documents, not to create the numbers. The question is, do you want the proactive advice from a city attorney who's going to protect your interests, or to stand by and say, well, it wasn't my fault, and let the city cut police 20%, cut parks programs, and cut after-school programs for kids. That's exactly what happened.
Mr. Pappas. I'll just read from a Long Beach Post article that's quoting the press telegram. Shannon said that part of the reason he is stepping down before his term is up next year is absolutely to give his chosen successor a chance to take the position. Shannon was forthright in saying that he will be campaigning for Assistant City Attorney Charles Parkin to replace him, just as his predecessor, John Calhoun, did to get him the position 15 years ago. So I don't know that that is accurate. I think the city attorney before Mr. Calhoun was Mr. Parkin's uncle, Robert Parkin. So I'm not sure that it's truly an election when we have that going.
Okay, next question. This does come from the audience, and I'll add to it a little bit. According to the city charter, the city attorney is responsible for all of the city's litigation, civil litigation. Please explain your personal experience leading from the front in your litigation experience. James, you want to start?
Sure. Well, like I said, after coming back from school, I went to work at Morrison & Forster, the largest law firm in California. I worked on complex litigation. These were very large cases, sometimes $10 million cases, sometimes $100 million, and more. You know, unlike a DUI case, these cases, you don't do trials every day. I worked with teams of folks to get the right thing for our clients. We advise the clients about how to avoid this kind of situation. We advise the clients what they need to do to win the cases. Many cases took years, but I'm proud of my results. One result, I worked on behalf of a client. It was a pro bono case. We didn't charge her a single dollar. But working for her, she had been physically abused. She'd been sexually abused, kept without wages. Prosecutors didn't bring the case, and I don't know why, although I'd speculate it was too difficult. It was a he said, she said case. My firm took the case, and I worked on it, and I helped resolve that to get a great settlement for her. I worked on many cases, insurance, employment, etc. But since then, what have I done? I've taught law business at Cal State Long Beach. I've worked at the City of Long Beach. And I think it's important to remember that the city attorney is not a trial position. If you want a trial lawyer, you're not elected a city attorney. This office is a leader of the office, and that's why I'm going to be a leader at the Long Beach City Attorney.
Mr. Pappas.
I've been engaged in litigation with cities throughout Southern California for the last approximately 5 years. Handled many, many cases, and I was in court just today, as I said earlier this morning, with Deputy City Attorney Ted Zinger. So, and I over the last few years, have been in court regularly on the civil cases. I don't handle criminal cases, Mr. Albert's area. I handle civil cases, and my cases have gone to the state appellate courts. We had published opinions at the state appellate court level. We've gone to the United States Supreme Court. Recently, in October of last year, we were able to win in cases against the federal government where they were seeking to forfeit the properties of people policing for profit. That was what it was titled and called, and I think Mr. Albert was referring to that earlier. We were able to do that and prevent thousands and thousands of patients in Southern California from being adversely impacted by that. We have cases pending against the city related to, and these are all cases that are in court that are being litigated, related to the abuse of a black man who was in a collective, stepped on by a police officer. That was a proud moment for the city's police, and I think it's important as city attorney that we have that background and experience in court and understand what can happen so that we can make the right decision with respect to whether or not we take cases to trial or settle them. We do the right thing for the city and for the taxpayers and for all of the citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Parkin.
Thank you. I began with the City Attorney's Office in 1995 in the litigation section. And there I conducted jury trials on behalf of the city, representing the city of Long Beach and their interests. I also handled cases, contract cases in there where we represented the city of Long Beach to evict tenants or to collect on contract damages. I also handled a case in the oil department, or as I mentioned earlier, with the abandonment fund. We received a verdict against in the Court of Appeal, a published decision where we were able to set aside $200 million to abandon the oil wells when the oil money runs out for the state's portion of that property. I also most recently was handling a water case where we were trying to amend a groundwater judgment, where we're trying to be able to store water in wet years and groundwater below the city of Long Beach. Long Beach gets about half of their water from groundwater. And so in those wet years, we would be available to store the water. The judgment in 1964 didn't allow for that. So we went all the way up to the Supreme Court and then back down, and we're back now. And we think we have a judgment coming soon where the parties are going to agree to that. So that's the most recent. I also handled on the city's behalf the Queen Mary bankruptcy, where we recovered $8.6 million, including all of our outside counsel fees that we used with the bankruptcy counsel of wealth representatives.
Thank you. James, 1 minute.
Once again, not everyone here may be familiar with the city attorney's office. This is a leadership position. That's why we elect the city attorney. So the question is, who's going to lead this office? We're going to have great deputy city attorneys. Frankly, if I get elected, it's a Pappas and Mr. Parkin. Who can lead the office to greatness? You know, I think, for example, I've already talked about, as a leader, I can stand up and disclose conflicts of interest, and they should be disclosed, even if it's uncomfortable. I have a record of doing that. I also would support my trial attorneys, and they say, James, I have to settle this case, that's the best thing for the city. I would go to the council and say, you know what? We need $2 million to settle this case to prevent losing $6, $7 million. And it may be uncomfortable to make that request, but if my council says to do that, we should do that. You know, I've been endorsed by the former head of the State Bar Association of California, former head of the Los Angeles County Bar Association, former head, several heads of Long Beach Bar Association. They know I have experience.
Thank you. Matt?
Well, Mr. Johnson, I think practiced law for, by your own permission, about 2 years, 2+ years, is that what it was, before you went into city government. I'm not sure that that's the experience level that we need for somebody who's going to head the legal department, the second largest city in Los Angeles County. I also think that Mr. Johnson was concerned about whether or not, and I think he disagreed with a decision made about him transferring $71,000 from the city council campaign into his city attorney campaign. I think if his statement back in August was he wouldn't follow that to some case precedent, but it's the city's own law, that's the problem. We need somebody who's going to follow the laws of the city.
Mr. Park.
Thank you. Yes, I don't think that James has the experience. He has 1 year, 11 months at Morrison Forrester. He says he worked on these cases for years. It's physically impossible. 6 months at another firm. So there is no legal leadership coming from Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Pappas comes from a private practice where it's only civil work. He has no other litigation experience that I bring to the office, dealing with contracts, dealing with city departments, dealing with all the various issues, the airport, the harbor, the water department, etc.
Thank you.
We had some question here from the audience. Long Beach has faced numerous financial problems over the past several years. What would you do as city attorney to save taxpayer dollars in the future? Matt, you want to start?
Well, the first thing that I would do to save taxpayer dollars is to establish a program that will reduce the number of claims that we're getting for actions taken by different divisions of the city for bad behavior going on with the police department, for instance. We've had some issues with police shootings. We had a verdict this year, $6.5 million in the Zerbe case. And a lot of the problem that exists is that we do not have a policy system, a formal system that you would have in a city the size of Long Beach to help promulgate policies and behavior controls that will eliminate those types of costs and judgments. We also need to establish a system where we evaluate cases properly in terms of whether or not they should go to trial, so we don't have these huge judgments against the city that have happened. We've had more shootings this year. They're all over the press, and I think those are going to lead to additional litigation and litigation costs. So we need to cut those costs down by doing the right things on a proactive basis in the city attorney's office. It takes leadership. It takes knowing whether or not a case should be settled or taken to trial. I don't think that's being done right now in the city attorney's office. So we'll cut those costs down. And we can cut costs as well by ensuring that contracts we execute for folks that are using city resources or for city services are contracts that are done properly and work in favor of taxpayers.
James?
Well, right off the bat, pension reform's not done. We received some news recently, I believe we'll discuss it at council this week, that the city's going to look at $30 million additional a year to pay into our pension fund. So the question's going to have to be, which of the candidates can help advise the council, and they're the policymakers, but advise them on how to create a solution. I don't have special interest spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on my behalf because they fight against pension reform. My opponent, Mr. Parkin, does. Follow the money. I'm going to be the independent person who can advise on a critical issue. Also, I think I can save money in the office. I can save money by, when it's appropriate, actually hiring more deputy city attorneys and reducing some of the very expensive contracting out. I think sometimes contracting out is appropriate, but I want to look at that balance. Also, like I mentioned, I think some of these cases should be settled. We lost a $6.5 million judgment in a police shooting. I think the question is, if the officers have allegedly shot and killed an innocent person holding a garden hose, is that a case you want to go to trial on? The city attorney's office said yes. I want to settle that case. And finally, I want to work with other jurisdictions. I've been endorsed by the Los Angeles City Attorney. I've been endorsed by the former Attorney General of California. I want to work with them and talk to them. What are the best practices? What's San Francisco doing? What's San Diego doing? I want to work with those folks and bring those best practices home to Long Beach. That's what a leader does.
Thank you. To protect our tax dollars, that's our job. We have to protect the taxpayers' dollars. That's what we do in our office. And we do that. We sued the county of Los Angeles to collect $4.6 million in property tax that they were withholding. We received our money in that case. We do evaluate our cases. I mean, everybody says we don't settle cases. We do settle cases. James is being disingenuous. When we bring those to the city council, we're telling them, we're ready to try this case, but we can't settle it. Here's the dollar amount. What do you as the policymakers want to do? If we're bringing those cases to them and making the informed decisions, the Zerbe case was not a garden hose by an individual. Zerbe was a tragic result. There's no doubt about that. But that's a case where the police officers, we believe, followed the policy to the letter of the law. We couldn't settle that case. We talked to council about that case and settling that case. I think the demand before we went to trial was over $35 million. That case was a case that was going to get tried. These people are Monday morning quarterbacking, I guess, but it's a popular thing to do, but cases do need to be tried. We get cases ready to try. That's how you settle cases. When they know you're going to try a case, you're more inclined to get it settled before the trial happens.
Rebuttal. Matt?
If we had implemented policies and a system for the police department that would have prevented the shooting in the first place, then we would not have to deal with a potential $35 million demand by the plaintiffs. And we haven't done those things because the city attorney's office is not proactive. In fact, it is beholden to the Police Officers Association, which Mr. Parkin has been endorsed by, and who has passed out and sent misrepresentative materials out about both his experience and him being previously elected city attorney, saying to re-elect him. We need to not be beholden to these special interests and be able to act independently and properly.
You know, one of the biggest issues of this campaign is who's going to be that independent voice, who's going to have the judgment, even when it's tough. When I was sitting down and figuring out how to solve some of our pension issues and other fiscal issues, unfunded liabilities, so forth, I knew some of the decisions I was going to make were going to cause me a lot of problems. I knew that by saving the city $230 million over 10 years, that money coming from different groups was going to create a political problem. But you know what? I did what was right for the public interest. That's what I do again. If you want to know how I'm going to act in the future, look at the past. Look at the budget surplus. Look at the pension reform. That's how I'm going to act. That's why it's so important to elect the next city attorney who's not beholden to these groups, who has the independence to do the right thing.
I'm proud to have the endorsement of the police department and the fire department. I've worked with them since 1995. I've defended them in court. I worked with them on the insurance advisory committee. I've worked with them. They know me. They know that I'm straight with them. They know we don't agree all the time. And it's kind of ironic that James interviewed and requested their endorsement. He didn't get it, and now all of a sudden he's the strong, independent voice. If they would have offered him the endorsement, he's admitted he would have taken it. So it's kind of ironic.
Okay, this is the one that everybody's been waiting for. We've got two questions regarding marijuana law. I'm going to try to combine the two, and I hope you forgive me if I avoid the editorializing in the questions. The first is, as we talked about in the beginning, SB 1262, which is a proposed bill at the state right now, talking about a statewide attempt to regulate the use of medical marijuana from the doctors through the collectives. And the second is on December 17th, 2013, the council unanimously voted to create a mechanism to accommodate the vetted collectives. How do you propose to do that? What I'm going to ask you is to first answer, do you support or oppose SB 1262 and why? And secondly, how are you proposing to deal with the current direction from the council to come up with some way to allow some medical marijuana collectives? I believe it's your turn, Charles.
Thank you. SB 1262, the statewide attempt, I would welcome help at the state level with medical marijuana. It's been a cloudy issue for a long time, and I think to really solve this problem, we need assistance at the federal and state level for them to set direction to help cities deal with it. Cities dealing with it on their own are spending a lot of resources, a lot of time and effort to try and deal with the medical marijuana situation. I think council has made it clear that they want another attempt at regulating medical marijuana, and we've taken that direction, and we've gone to the Planning Commission, and we believe we're going to be, and we're working with medical marijuana collectives to bring back something to the city council that works for both sides, but still addresses the issues that were raised in our previous regulations with the nuisances and the problems at the locations, so that the disproportionate burden of that medical marijuana isn't placed on the businesses and the homeowners adjacent to where these storefronts are located.
Let's let James have the last word on this one. Matt?
Well, I support statewide legislation that would, on a consistent basis, provide guidance for regulation, or actual regulation of medical cannabis collectors. SB 1262, I think, has some issues that need to be addressed, and the legislature will have to address those as it moves forward towards deciding whether or not to implement that law. In regard to federal legislation, the federal government is a government of enumerated powers. One of its enumerated powers is not deregulating drugs. That is not one of its enumerated powers. And so the need to have federal government buy into this is really the need for federalism to work correctly in the United States of America. That means the federal government shouldn't be interfering in areas that are not its enumerated powers. I think when you stand up and you're advocating for your citizens who benefit from medical cannabis, the citizens who are seriously ill and disabled, and for whom it is effective, that you do that and you stand up for the law the way it's supposed to be. And that is that as local individuals, we regulate in this area. The state regulates in this area as that sovereign, not the federal government. I've heard several times from people up here talking about how we need federal assistance. We do not need federal assistance. We need less federal assistance. We need less federal involvement. And we need more effort for people at the local level to have the ability to regulate things in their daily lives. That's what we need to do. I think state regulation is great. I think the city needs to create an ordinance that is effective, that balances the needs of the seriously ill and disabled with the valid public health, safety, and welfare needs of the city.
James?
Well, SB 1262 is a good attorney, and I tell you, I don't support legislation I haven't read, so I haven't read it yet and reserve my judgment. I will say that clearly we need some state and federal guidance here. And what we have right now is not what I teach to my law students or my students at Cal State Long Beach. I don't teach them that there's a federal law, you don't like it, just don't enforce it. That's the federal government's current position. We're not going to enforce the law unless we want to, and then we will when we want to. That's not how democracy works. And that's a big problem. The federal government, once again, is not doing their job, and they're now letting states to struggle with this very difficult issue. I personally support medical marijuana. I think the council pretty clearly wants to provide a safe, regulated, taxed environment. I think the problem is, and let me just go real quickly, what's the ideal solution? If this is a medicine, it should be prescribed at the pharmacy. And over everyone says that. But the federal government won't allow us to do that. So what do we do in the absence of federal action? That's the question. What I want to do is work with other cities, ask Los Angeles, work with San Francisco, say, what works there? I think we can bring best practices. The last city attorney basically told us we couldn't regulate medical marijuana, and that's where we're in the place. I want to revisit that. I have some questions about what can and can't be done, get some fresh eyes, work with other cities, and see if we can have a regulated tax environment that's good for patients to get their medicine, but protects neighborhoods and neighborhood quality of life.
Charles? No? Matt, you want more?
Mr. Johnson is obviously not familiar with Federalist number 45 and Federalist number 46, where the founders of this country, the framers of the Constitution, the people who were advocating for the Constitution as a replacement for the Articles of Confederation, made clear that if and when the federal government exceeded the scope of its power, it would be necessary for people at the local level to fight back at that. That is part of our system. That's part of our heritage. It's part of the United States of America. That's what we need to do when those things occur. Also, Mr. Johnson referred to the fact that the appellate court said the city could not regulate medical marijuana. That is incorrect. That is not what the appellate court said in PAC. It said that the city could regulate that. It said that the exorbitant fees that it was charging in one small section of its ordinance conflicted with federal law. That's what it said. The city could have regulated, it could have done that, except the city attorney adopting policy that he didn't like medical marijuana at the time. That's Robert Shannon, came to the council and gave it advice that was incorrect and improper, that has led to the arrest of hundreds.
And in this new position as city editor. Matt, do you want to start with that? Did I say city editor? Oh, that's a tougher job. City attorney, let me say.
What keeps me up at night right now is knowing that this country has more people in prison than any other country in the world, more than Russia, Iran, and China. It has 5% of the world's population, has 25% of its incarcerated population. I don't think we need to be putting people in jail for everything. A lot about jail during the prosecutor discussions. I've seen people get harmed when they're put in jail. 40% of the people that are in our jails are in there for nonviolent drug offenses. We need to change the law. We need to think about people. We need to do the right thing for our citizens. And not just the citizens in the neighborhood associations or that are folks who are wealthy and own homes, but for all of the citizens. For the people who are disenfranchised because they're working every single day and they live in sections of the city where they worry about paying their rent, whether or not they're going to have food on the table. We need to take care of all of our citizens. That's important. I think when I'm city attorney, I worry about the same things. So I think it's important that as city attorney, we represent the people of the city of Long Beach, not special interests, not the Police Officers Association, not labor unions that have endorsed us, required us to sign special statements that were pledges. We need to do the right thing by the people, and we need to do that in a way that's responsible, straightforward, and that represents a form of government that is what is designed to be our government in this country.
Well, what keeps me up at night is the tremendous responsibility of being an elected official. You know, I think about the honor it's been to live in the city of Long Beach. You know, a middle-class kid whose dad worked at Boeing or Douglas back when everybody's dad worked at Douglas, whose mom was a school teacher, and I got to go to the school of my choice. I got a fantastic education here at Long Beach Unified. I played in our parks, always felt safe as a kid. I think about that city I grew up in, and I always think today, are today's young people getting those same opportunities? Will my kids get the same opportunities? But more importantly, will everybody's kids get the same opportunities? Our kids in West Long Beach, North Long Beach, do they feel safe like I did? Or do they have a different reality? Our kids at Cabrillo High School and Jordan High School, are they getting a fantastic world-class education that'll allow them to go to Harvard or Berkeley or wherever they want to go to? Or are they getting a different kind of education? And what can I do as city council member? I think about the fact that we cut police officers 20%, reduce our after-school programs, cut library hours, and I think about the tremendous financial mistakes, obviously the pension abuse being the biggest one, that have caused many people in Long Beach to suffer, particularly working class and poor folks who depend on city services. As the next city attorney, I'm going to think every day about what can I do to make this the best city attorney's office? How can I lead to prevent those kind of abuses that have happened in the past from happening again? What can I do to make sure that tomorrow's children live in the best possible city, a coastal city that's one of three in the state, San Francisco, San Diego, and Long Beach, to have an oceanfront downtown. I'm going to think about making this the city of our dreams, what I can do as city attorney to move that forward.
Well, under the charter, we're the sole and exclusive legal advisor to the city, and that's enough to keep you up at night, all the other things that they were talking about. And I think, I don't mean to make fun of that. It's a challenging job, it's an exciting job, but it's a very important job. And what keeps me up is making sure, and I'm always concerned that we're giving the best advice, that we get it right. That at the end of the day, I can go home and say we gave them the best advice we knew at that time with all the information available. And if we've done that, and we allow the council to make an informed decision on whatever policy matter they're discussing, then I think we've done a good job, and that will help us.
I'm not surprised since we're talking.
Well, I haven't lived in Long Beach that long. I've been here for a number of years, and I've developed some of the closest friendships and relationships that I have in the world. It's a beautiful city, and it has a great population that's unique, and it is a great place to live. We have two candidates who represent the status quo here. They are individuals who've been in city government, who've been the status quo for a number of years. I think that it is fairly disingenuous that materials have gone out from Mr. Parkin representing that he has 19 years of experience prosecuting criminal cases related to drug criminals and to prostitutes. That's not the job of the city attorney, that's the job of Mr. Halford. I think that it is also important that when we are going to be the city's lead attorney, that we follow the city's election laws and not say that we're going to just bypass those and take $71,000 from one campaign over to the other. To be city attorney, it is important that we have the right character and we have the right credentials. I certainly have 20 years of experience as a lawyer that has put a system in that has done the regulatory health care compliance work for Molina Healthcare here. Looked at it a number of years ago as well. So from a perspective of doing that type of work all the way to the litigation work that's so important for this office. And it's necessary that we have change, not the status quo that has gone on for so many years.
Okay.
Well, first I want to thank the reporters who caused us to go long, but I'm just kidding, for having this. But I want to thank all the guests for being here. You guys are what makes this a special night and a special election, because it is time for you to choose. Over the last 5 decades, I don't believe you've seen the kind of choice that you, the voters, decide. I don't think it's right for the old city attorney to resign before his term's up to jimmy the system to help his buddy out. That's not democracy. Democracy is an open, fair election, and I hope no matter what happens, we're going to have that in this election. And that's important. Because this position, once again, is elected for a reason. It's a leadership position. A position where the person leads a team of attorneys, a position where you have to make the tough calls. I believe past performance is the best indicator of future results. There's a reason people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars against me. It's not because they like pension reform. It's because they know I'm going to stand up for the residents in the public interest. They know that I'm going to make sure that kid at Wardlow Park or that kid at Silverado Park, he gets the services he deserves instead of going to these outrageous abuses we've seen time and time again in the past. This is an office where we need someone who has the experience of standing up and doing what's right even when it's not popular. I'm the only one with the experience as elected official. The experience of saying, you know what? No, we're not going to do that. So I appreciate everyone for coming out. I'd ask for your vote. And I look forward to seeing you not just during campaign time, but in the next 4 years as your next city attorney.
Thank you. This is a nonpartisan position, and I have no other political aspirations. I've worked for the city for 29 years. My dad worked for the city for 23 years. My uncle worked for the city for 30 years. This position would be the culmination of my career as a city attorney. It's an extremely challenging job. I've had the pleasure of doing it now for 8 months, and I would like to continue with your support for an additional 4 years. We have a range of issues that we address in our office, and we touched on many of those this evening, but providing the correct legal advice to the client is absolutely essential. In this job, experience does matter, and managed attorneys does matter, critical staff. That's why I believe I have a broad base of support and endorsements from both Democrats and Republicans. And I'm happy tonight to announce that Don Knabe is joining those list of endorsements. I have business and I have labor. I think they recognize that my years of experience is the reason why I should be the next city attorney. I hope you will support me. I hope you'll take time to take some of the material in the back. There's a Long Beach Business Journal out there, this current edition. I hope you take time to read that. It goes into a lot of the issues that we deal with, a lot of the different things, and they spend a lot of time describing our office. I think it would be good for you if you could take a look at that. Also, I would ask for your vote on April 4th for city attorney. Thank you.